I would like to start our Santa Clara River Watershed Committee meeting. I'm going to share my screen so we can see the agenda. How does that look for everyone?
There you go.
Okay, great. We have a couple people here in person, so I'd like to go around and do introductions. I'll start. I'm Lauren, and I work with the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, also serve as a coordinator for the Santa Clara River Watershed Committee. If you have any updates or general announcements, please feel free to include them at this time. I'll start in the room.
Hello, I'm Rachel Ray. I also work with the Ventura County Resource Conservation District and focus on our restoration projects. And I will pass it on to the next person in the room.
Good morning. My name is Michael Durazo. I'm a field representative for Supervisor Kelly Long, covering the Santa Clara Valley.
Hello, Ventura County Supervisor Kelly Long.
Tony Emmert with United Water Conservation District.
Holly Wright, Friends of Santa Clara River and Channel Islands Restoration.
John Demers from the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency.
Hello, Alyssa Gomez with the Nature Conservancy.
Peter Dixon with the Nature Conservancy.
Amanda Begley with Tree People.
Eric Wilson, also with Tree People.
Great. Thank you all for being here in person. I'd also like to go around and have the people in our Zoom meeting do a round of introductions. Please put it in the chat but we'll see if we can hear you. Okay. Let's see.
Morning, this is Sean Kelly with the Santa Clara River Conservancy.
I'll go. Rick Vasilopoulos, Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency.
Avery Blackwell with Geosyntax Consultants.
Mark Baylor with Beacon.
This is Adriana Stovall with Rincon Consultants.
Zach Hoagland with the California Conservation Corps.
I think all I see left is Celine Moomey, but she also said she can't hear. So hopefully, Celine, you work that out. But Celine works with the Ventura County Fire Department. Thank you for joining us. Okay, moving back to our agenda, I do want to give time for people to provide any general committee member updates and announcements. I can start. So something that the committee has been working on behind the scenes is developing a charter. We're beginning this process, and we just had our first steering committee meeting. And that is why this meeting is starting at 10, whereas it usually starts at 9. So thank you all for joining us an hour later than usual. We have a couple people already on our steering committee. That is the City of Ventura and Ventura Water, the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, United Water Conservation District, the Nature Conservancy, Friends of the Santa Clara River, and Channel Islands Restoration. Sorry, I'm trying to admit people to the meeting, and the Ventura County Farm Bureau, and a private landowner and farmer named Lisa Tate, and of course, the Resource Conservation District. Okay, besides that, for the Resource Conservation District, I have been wanting to share at this meeting, but we ran out of time at the last meeting, that we're working on a wildfire regional preparedness plan for the county. And it's in full swing all summer long. We did community outreach for it and seeking community feedback. Essentially, we are developing a dashboard to log priority projects into, so we can keep track of projects that are already happening in the county and projects that might want to happen in the county. And this can and should extend to our partners in the Santa Clara River Watershed. So if you'd like to hear more about that project, please reach out to me. And if we don't touch base about this in the immediate future, this will be an online and living dashboard so we can keep the conversation going well into the future. One of the big things that have come up in past meetings are looking at invasive arundo and other invasive species as a fuel hazard. And obviously, I think we're all interested in the watershed-wide eradication of it. So maybe this dashboard can be a tool, an educational tool, or a tool that can help us identify funding to fund something like that. And also potentially there are infrastructure updates that may be needed. But we did have a good presentation on response mechanisms during high power shutoff events. So just sparking some ideas there and providing you guys that we do have that plan in the works and it should be done in spring. And I'd like to invite anyone else to come forward with any announcements.
All right, I'll chime in with one. So I've been working with Eric Stein at SCRWC and Santa Clara Valley Water Agency on a Santa Clara River Arundo management program that I think some of you have been in the loop on. But we just wanted to give an update that we're working to develop mechanisms to support the long-term management and maintenance of invasive weed control in the entire Santa Clara River. We are focusing on three main components to establish program government and management for the entire watershed, and a funding strategy and fiduciary management, and then also to do monitoring, tracking, and reporting of these. There will be some follow-up materials, a PowerPoint that Lauren will send out that has our contact information on it and a little bit more about what I just said. Please feel free to reach out to myself, Amanda Begley, or Eric Stein, and we hope to update this group more and engage with you further on this. There seems to be a lot of overlap, so thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Amanda, and thank you for that update. Okay, I'd like to move forward with our updates from the Santa Clara River GSAs. We can start with the representatives from Fox Canyon.
All right. Thank you very much, Lauren. I'm Rob Hampson. I'm a hydrologist with the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, and we are the GSA for Las Posas, Pleasant Valley, and Oxnard Basin. The main updates I have for you right now is that the water year just ended, so we're working on our annual reports. We have previously just been meeting the DWR requirements for these annual reports, and so this year we're updating them a lot with new figures and informational items that I hope will help our board and members of our community really visualize the issues that we have in the basin and really be able to see those problems. If you have these 100-page annual reports and you read them and it's kind of hard to tell what's really going on in the basin, and it meets regulatory requirements, that's great, but we want to have these tools that really display the basin conditions. And so hopefully that'll be a great update. I also have our bigger update sitting right here is that we have our first full-time executive officer that was recently hired. And so we're really happy to have him. In the past, Fox Canyon has had an executive officer that also oversaw other departments. And so some of those individuals can be very busy. And so through litigation and through Sigma, our agency's responsibilities have grown substantially over the past 5 years and even over the past 3 years. So it requires a lot of work and a lot of attention. And so John Demers is sitting here. John, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself at all, but we're really excited to have him. And yeah, we're just going to be happier to have an executive officer.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. So as Rob mentioned, I am the first to hold this on a permanent or full-time basis. So I'm happy to be here. I've been in the seat just a little over 2 months now. And as I keep telling everybody, it's like, I almost have it all figured out. Almost. Soon. But anyway, I am happy to be here. Just quickly background, I was a career Navy officer, and then since then I've done a variety of things. But for the last 5 years, I was working for the Navy again as a civilian. I was the sustainability lead for our West Coast test ranges in the aviation community, which is the way the Navy defines sustainability. It was very broad-based, which is everything from water resiliency and energy resiliency to natural resources management to environmental planning, NEPA compliance, et cetera. So it was a big portfolio of things that we had. And I'm very happy to be here and in the seat and very focused on groundwater here and working with everyone. Again, I haven't met everyone yet. There's a lot of people online that I haven't met with yet. Would be happy to take an email or a phone call or meet or engage with you in any way, just to just to expand the network of people who are all working together for the common interests that we have. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to this area. Next, we can have our United Water representative speak.
Okay, I'm one of those guys that's an executive director of GSA and has another daytime job. So I feel the tug of various things. But on the GSA front, the Fillmore and Piru Basins GSA is probably has a dual track. One is because that GSA has groundwater dependent ecosystem areas that are very important. They were identified in the initial plans as areas that more data needed to be gathered. So there's an effort on trying to find and or construct a lot of shallow monitoring wells and monitor surface water data that United Water Conservation District wasn't already doing. Actually, we're really blessed in this area to have a lot of historical data and analysis. Some areas started with nothing, so I get to go back. That actually helps me to go back to people at United, and I can kind of lean on people and say, well, when you're out there, can you gather this extra hydrology information, and can you find some other wells? So there's a lot of that going on because we have data gaps that around these important areas, and then that may take a few years, and then it feeds into planning. And then the other effort that it seems amazing, we're already doing 5-year evaluation on the original GSPs. So there are 2 of them for that GSA. And then because we already identified issues, the GSA has chosen to do 2 new updated GSPs in addressing some of these issues that can be, not the longer term one. So for a small organization, there's a lot of work in the next couple of years along those lines. And I can probably report a little bit on the Santa Paula Basin. Kathleen is not here, but the Santa Paula Basin had been water level wise on a sort of very gradual decline over a few decades. And that has turned around a bit. And so we're seeing the water levels in both the east and the west side come back up. That of course is a basin that was adjudicated almost 30 years ago. And I don't have much to report on the Mound Basin. Brian Bondi isn't here, but the last time I heard from Brian, he said, there's no controversy in the Mound Basin and let's keep it that way. So that's probably a good thing when it comes to groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please go in the room. We have a question or comment.
Yeah, Tony, I was wanted to ask about the shallow groundwater monitoring program. If I'm, is that independent from the metered wells? And if you're installing new ones, is there a way that the public or others could access that data?
Yes and yes. We're looking for anything that exists that can come up with good data in those data gap areas. So in the basin boundaries area near the hatchery, the fish hatchery area in the Piru Basin, in the Fillmore Basin, all the way out at the Del Valle Cienega. That's all private land out there, and we've been having a bit of a hard time getting our friends at 5 Point to share data. And then we're also looking for data in the Sespe Creek, Santa Paula confluence area. That place has not been monitored super well. There's not a lot. I mean, there are wells there, but they're more they're deeper depth and production wells, and those don't make for good monitoring of shallow groundwater. So there are some that we found, but yes, all of that and all of our data is on the GSA's website. I'll complain a little bit about our own website, is that we have this wonderful tool that is this groundwater database, but you get to it by this tiny little lettering on the homepage that says, to the groundwater database, click here, and then it opens up this wonderful world of all the wells and all the historical data on each of them. And so all the grant funded wells that we installed a few years ago, those already have several years of data. It's all updated. Gus does a great job of updating that, but we're working on the website, so it'll be more intuitive to get to some of these things and get rid of the other things. But yes, but that data is available. And I think if there's anybody else that has data that isn't on there, we would love to include that.
Can I just add, if they have any wells or they're going to put any wells, let us know too, so that we're able to add that into our database.
One of the things that the GSA is doing, and DWR shares a importance, there are many shallow, older wells out in that area that are used for domestic purposes. And we haven't seen past droughts lead towards dewatered wells in that area, but it's something that we promised DWR we would dig into as deeply as we possibly could. And so some places we know that somebody has a shallow well that's used for drinking water, but it was constructed in 1942 and they have no construction information and no water level information. And we're working on that. So if you have any facilities or wells out in that area, you may hear from us on trying to dig as deeply as we can to gather accurate information, because DWR is very concerned about that, because a lot of places in the state, wells went completely dry and people were trucking water in. So so that's a requirement that we have to try to address right away.
Great, thank you all so much. Are there any lingering questions in regards to these GSA updates? Any in the virtual sphere? Okay, great. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here in person and online. I'd like to move along to our next presentation. This will be the one for the majority of the meeting. We are introducing Beacon and the Regional Coastal Adaptation Monitoring Program. Mark, it looks like you're here, so I'll invite you to share your screen when you're ready.
I'm here and I am. I did request to share my screen. Maybe I did it prematurely.
It's okay. I just made you a co-host, so hopefully that'll make it easier.
Let's see if that works. Thank you so much. You should be able to see a little PowerPoint presentation on my screen. Do you?
I see it. It looks good.
Let's do that way. How's that way? Better?
Yeah.
So, thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for your presence and your attention. Some of you I know either reputationally or actually know, some of you I've been in meetings with. And let me just introduce myself and the agency that I work for. And my name is Mark Baylor. I'm the executive director of Beacon, position I've held for the last 5 years, but although I've been a consultant for Beacon for years before that. Beacon is the Beach Erosion Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment, which is a mouthful. But we really are concerned with the preservation, restoration, and sustainability of our coastal resources and our coastal beaches. But one of the reasons that I think it's important for Beacon to come to a group like this is because our coastal sediment and sand resources, our beaches, are entirely dependent on the sediment and the sand that comes from our coastal draining watersheds. And so we have an intimate relationship together in planning for the future in both our terrestrial coastal draining watersheds, which you know as well or better than I do, and our so-called littoral cell resources, or our coastal near shore. And the Beacon landscape extends to the 2 counties of Ventura and Santa Barbara. And though this is a good graphic and demonstration of the reach of our landscape, it isn't even all accurate. In as much as the Cuyama River drains into the Twitchell Dam, which actually feeds the Santa Maria River, which is the northernmost extension of our region. So these relationships are really important. And again, I want to thank you for inviting Beacon to come. Now, I was going to make a special title page that acknowledged that I was here today before you at the Santa Clara River Watershed Committee, but instead I thought I would just keep the title page we have, because you're going to see what we've already presented to others. So make no mistake that you're getting the same information that we've been giving to others in briefing around the Regional Coastal Adaptation Monitoring Program. And just a little background on why Beacon is involved in this. Over the course of the last decade, like most of you, Beacon has pivoted to a concern for coastal adaptation integrated with regional sediment management. Our theory of life is that if we're going to do biomimicry and nature-based solutions, and we're going to do resource conservation along the coast, well, one of the major inputs is sand and sediment. And so Beacon has, as its main mission, the management of our sand resources. And therefore, I think we're really intimately involved in coastal adaptation. And for some of you may know this as a matter of history, Beacon was the first public agency to support the development of the Surfers Point Living Shoreline and Managed Retreat Project, which, as most of you know now, we just finished phase 2 after a very long time. But phase 1, which has been in place for some time, was installed in 2011 with the dunes installed in 2012. We have a decade of monitoring that we've performed, and we've broadened that monitoring over time through the decade. But we are very interested in participating in the design and development of proof of concept of these kinds of projects to show what the future may be, because we know that in the absence of providing real information around what options are and how they will play out, people are reluctant to buy into that future necessarily. But the Surfers Point project, which has survived El Nino, very strong winter storms, as you know, and which has really performed in the way it was designed to provide enough room for the coast to move and to provide enough room for the habitats to provide their ecosystem services that they do provide: storm protection, recreation, cultural, the whole gamut. So with a little bit of introduction, let me just move quickly past these slides that don't say anything to acknowledge the partnership of the RCAMP project. And I want to make a special mention that though we work with the city of Santa Barbara in sponsoring the grant from the California Coastal Commission, the reach of RCAMP is through the 2 counties, and therefore it's very relevant to the conversation you're having today. And we've included some measure of analysis of groundwater resources and monitoring needed in the draft RCAMP. So we have a broad-based partnership here. We have the funder, that is the commission, very interested in how this monitoring will be integrated back into local coastal plans and coastal planning. We worked with the city of Santa Barbara to manage the grant from the commission. And then we've had an enormous amount of interaction and outreach through the time we've been planning this. And most recently, we had a community briefing last month, and we've circulated the draft. So I know that the time of the draft circulation has passed, but I want you all to know that this is a living effort and a living document. And as we roll this out and engage with all the stakeholders and interested parties, we will necessarily revise, update, and elaborate on what we're doing, because some of the RCAMP is structured around available funds, and therefore it's not about the pilot projects being all that we need. It's just we've started this project. We think it has incredible relevance for the communities, but we started from, as was mentioned earlier, from a landscape that has a lot of rich data, but a lot of data gaps, and we're trying to collect these information in a way in which, like you all are, we can present it out in a transparent, usable way that could act as decision support tools. So we have outreached to, well, we engage at Beacon, and this is something I guess I should mention, is that we started a science advisory committee a few years ago. They've written a research agenda for Beacon, and they participate regularly in Beacon activities. And we rely on these local academic professionals to really help inform our work. And you all know about Dr. Patch at Cal State University Channel Islands or Charles Lester at UCSB. And we're very connected to the resources here, academic and scientific, as well as private sector and professional. So this agenda relates to the briefing. And because we have just a shorter time today, I will necessarily go over this in a high level overview. But if there's anybody that wants to dive more deeply into these topics, please know that we will engage you to the limits that we can with our staff and our consultants, in this case, ESA and a team. But I will cover all these topics really quickly today. Why we did this, what our objectives are, how we've gone through a planning process, an overview of our executive summary of our monitoring plan. As I say, recommended priority projects, and then how are we going to step this out over time? And so I will go through this, and I'm hoping that, whoops, I went back. I'm hoping that as I get through these topics, you can put any questions you might in the chat that we can then respond to, or hold your questions to the end if you'd like. So you can see that we include the entire littoral cell, which is the 2 counties. And as you know, we now have the Shumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary that extends beyond the northern boundary of our littoral cell, but all the way to Naples, California, which is basically just west of Goleta and Carpinteria. It's not reflected on this graphic, but it's a very important new initiative. And as we develop our information, we continually add this to features around things like our own dashboard. So you can see that we're trying to now construct a program where we can give back to the local management agencies the information needed to chart change and to support decisions around management. This picture happens to be a picture of the phase 1 of Surfers Point, if you're not familiar with that orientation. Now, over the course of the last 2 years, we have developed a stepwise process of outreach, plan development, community review, and then the development of these pilot projects, so-called pilot projects. So if you look at this graphic, we just finished or are in the process of the pilot review with the completion of our draft management plan. And we will continually be reporting back out to the community as we develop the next 18 months, the pilot studies, and then report back to the commission. The city of Santa Barbara actually raised their hand, and the reason they're involved is they raised their hand and said we would consider a LCP amendment focused on adaptation monitoring as just a way to start the conversation and get this going. and we will do that. And it's a forward-thinking activity on the part of the city. But we have other local municipalities involved quite closely. What does the plan do? It's an attempt to do what you're doing at the level which you're interested in one or another topics. We're trying to be, I think, highly focused in how can we support adaptation through monitoring topics that will really provide usable information for making decisions. One of the things that in this phase of our RCamp that we focused on, and RCamp, it really does embrace physical, ecological, social, cultural. But one of the early topics and one of the early priorities that we discussed was the effect of these changes on the protection of both life and property. So there is some focus on these priorities, not to the exclusion of all the other priorities, just in a sequencing of how we started this project and the limits that we have both for money and institutional capabilities. We heavily rely on existing data, and we've done the same thing that was mentioned earlier today. We actually identified data gaps, focused on adaptation planning, but as again, I'll say, regional sediment management and adaptation planning have a lot of overlap, and we try to integrate them as much as we can. We're relying on historical data that was developed by Beacon starting in the early 80s, mid 80s, and then continuing with USGS up until 2024. The problem with the way in which life works is that notwithstanding that USGS collected this data and periodically reported it back out to Beacon in its own work, we're probably a decade overdue for processing all that data, adding it to the new data we have, which is the satellite data. And some of you may have been at the recent Beacon webinar on Beaches from Space, where we had our colleague, Dr. Warwick from USGS, present a variety of studies and data collection efforts that are now going on. That is an attempt also to integrate this. But we now have a contract with USGS when the federal government reopens to fully process all that satellite and physical transect data for shoreline change and put it into a format in which we could imagine its use as a decision support data file and integrated data, which we'll talk about later a little bit. We have a series of criteria that we developed both with the science community and with our stakeholder community, and they're on the list. I'm not going to read them all, but I will say they're not hierarchical per se, but the plan does bias the need to protect property and life from the combination of sea level rise and the changes in climate and weather, which we all note as probably best described as extreme events. And we in our community, and you know this in your community, in our community, that we've had incidents already of the combination of sea level rise, storm, and extreme events, and the resulting combined effects of that. We are focused on one topic, which is the combined flooding effects. We have storm and coastal flooding, but we also have flooding from rain and from watershed resources. And therefore, we need to analyze this together. And as you know, some of the existing tools, though they're good, they don't integrate at this level. And this is an area, a topic that we did develop that needs attention. What did I just do? I think I went too far. Whoops, sorry. Excuse me. Because we have limited resources, not because the need is limited, but because we have limited fiscal resources. For purposes of the initial monitoring plan development, we divided our identified priorities into 3 levels, and we focused on the critical priority, notwithstanding that we identified high and priority. So they're all priorities, and we know this. We're trying to get to an implementation stage where we can start to do some of the work that's needed to make the monitoring data useful on a daily basis to decision making, which is just an important topic for your conversation at your work and for Beacon's conversation in our work. So I want to go through some of the topics that are included in the 3 priorities. Because you'll see sea level rise, you see sandy beach shoreline change, you see bluff erosion, you see us integrating storm events, combined coastal and creek flooding. We move into really understanding the baseline of sediment source, transport, and fate, so-called sediment movement. And we identify the need to address and integrate with Chumash residents in our 2 counties in a formal way, because Beacon is part of, it's a chartered state government agency. And then finally, to develop a focus on some social vulnerability monitoring. I'm not going to go into all the details in the slide in the interest of time, because I have about 10 more minutes. But I want to identify what the topics are. And then I want to invite you all, if you have not reviewed the plan in the areas that you're interested in, or if you had not had time to review the plan, we've posted the plan to the Beacon website. We've created an executive summary that is a guide into the deeper plan, which we think helps just wayfinding through a very complex set of monitoring topics, which we divided again into physical, ecological, social, cultural, and then Chumash tribal consultation needs to address what we think are the topics that we believe are all the priority topics. So the components of our priorities have been analyzed for what it is that we're trying to get at, and then what analysis has to take place in order to substantiate the change component and or the threat to the resources. So for every topic, there's an approach that we've developed, and then there's some analysis connected to the use of that data. And I invite you all to critique this, the framework, the substance of it. It's a living document and a living effort on Beacon's part. And I think it's really important for us to all weigh in on what we think can be done and should be done. It will be amended, updated, revised periodically, added to. So it is very much a living effort. Again, this just summarizes the topics that represent the monitoring topics that everyone has identified to us to date. And we will add what is needed based on comments we've received and continue to evolve this initial effort. I will stop here for just 1 second to emphasize that from Beacon's point of view, and I do believe from the community's, larger community's point of view, that we have started at Beacon to understand better the Chumash community and their use and stewardship of coastal resources. And we have engaged them to ask them, what is it that we could partner on and how can we partner? And the initial response is contained in these just 4 little bullets that have been common themes in this process, which we will really be acting on. So we hope to involve the Chumash better in the monitoring planning process, to integrate values that they think are important and may not be included in our monitoring plan, and to recognize the long-term partnership that we need to establish and continually nourish in our efforts. So one of the elements of the grant that the commission gave us was to identify, with a little bit of money that we were provided, some pilot efforts that could advance our work. So as I mentioned, one of the needs in our region is to take the benefit of the investment in this topic, and I'll just focus here on this topic being shoreline change analysis, and bring it forward to a useful, understandable data file or data set that people can actually act on. So we've been working with the USGS, as I mentioned, for some time together. Beacon initiated shoreline transect monitoring some years ago. USGS picked it up. But we have 10 years of monitoring data that we've never processed fully nor availed any one of. And so one of the pilot projects that we've suggested and are recommending that we implement is to really bring the data that we need. Because in the time in which we've been doing physical transect monitoring, satellite imaging and monitoring has also come along, which USGS is also involved in. And so we've asked them to integrate that data into usable information. And this little graphic that's on the page shows you the different kinds of data that USGS and CSUCI have been involved in our region, and then what the data gives you. And as we process this up, we're developing at the same time a framework for using the information. So we've asked USGS to begin to structure this into a framework that could be put into a viewer or a dashboard or whatever you might call it, such that it could be available in a transparent manner and in a usable manner to the larger stakeholder community and to all the agencies. We have received money for that, and when the federal government opens again, we will start this process, and next year, by spring, we hope to have this part of the project done for initial review by stakeholders, by agencies, by community. So that's one of the efforts we're doing under this. We have about $200,000, give or take. We're going to apply roughly half of this to the contract with USGS to provide this information. And then we think that might be a model for how we would develop a larger monitoring program for other topics into some kind of tool. The other thing we're going to do is, because we started from nothing, there are no regional coastal adaptation monitoring programs that exist in California in the way in which we've started to imagine this. There's a lot of monitoring. There's a ton of monitoring, actually. Some of it not available at all, some of it available, but it's fragmented and ad hoc. But we started one of the initial efforts to do this on a landscape basis, on our littoral cell basis that links our terrestrial landscapes to our marine landscapes. And so we're going to, using our consultant resources at Environmental Science Associates, design what a regional monitoring program report that would be given out to the community would be as we update this data. So in addition to trying to develop a dashboard that can begin to take this data in a usable and understandable manner, periodically, and we haven't decided on the periodicity, we said maybe every 3 years, we would issue an update on what has changed in that period of time. And what are the threat and changing threats? And what have we done to monitor more specifically these topics? Now, I didn't cover this in my comments yet, but I want to mention that we've addressed some bit of our time to groundwater resources in the RCAMP report. So I would ask all of you to think through that maybe that would be a gateway in which you could understand whether this meets needs or whether it doesn't meet needs. Because this topic is a very important one going forward, obviously, in our region. So those are the two things we're going to do in the next year or two as we develop a way to understand how to use this information, as I said, for decision support. And we are now moving into the pilot study period of our planning process. And as I say, as we conclude, we will have an initial monitoring plan and a framework. And the city of Santa Barbara, as a model to other local jurisdictions, will have an LCP amendment addressing monitoring that can support adaptation. And I don't need to tell you all what you probably already know, but there is now new legislation that requires an obligation that this topic be integrated into all local coastal plans within 2030, I believe, is the deadline for that. So there's urgency, there's requirements to do it, and we're trying to help facilitate that. So what are our next steps? I've foreshadowed a few of them. We are going to launch our pilot projects now. We would like to be able to, and I don't know if this will work, we have some questions that the community wants, and so we thought we'd go back to the Science Advisory Committee, report on the plan draft, and then on the pilot study. So it's more like a memo than a report. We have this obligation to support the city in developing a model LCP amendment addressing monitoring to support adaptation. And I'm hoping that as we work through the pilot study with USGS, that we structure enough back and forth so that you in the community help structure how does the information need to be packaged and curated and organized so that it can be most useful for decision support. So we'll be back with these topics to you and to others. I want to say that I'm sorry time is so short every single day. I did join you early before I was going to come on because I think Beacon has as much, I want to leave you with this, Beacon has as much to learn as does Beacon have to share. And I was very interested in your conversation this morning because everybody on every topic is having the same conversation. What are the data gaps? What are the monitoring? How do we get it in a form that we can use it? And how do we structure it to be supportive of better decisions? So with that, I'll finish right now. I think I left the time I'm supposed to for Q&A. And again, I want to thank you all for your attention today and for caring enough to even ask Beacon to come and talk to you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, this was great. This was a recommendation from someone from the city of Ventura. They went to your Beacon webinar and mentioned that this would be a good presentation to reach out to. So I really appreciate you being available to come. Do you have any immediate questions in the room or over Zoom? Okay, I have a couple. I was curious, this might have just gone over my head a little bit, but like, are there monitoring sites already identified in the Santa Clara River watershed?
There's a section on groundwater monitoring, and we uplifted, I believe, all the monitoring that exists in the Santa Clara River watershed. So there's like a map, and I presume it came from all you. So yes, it is addressed. I can't cite chapter and verse on what page, but yes, it is responsive. And then you should look at it to make sure it's accurate and comprehensive.
Great, yeah. If people did review the Beacon plan, is reaching out to you or information on their website the best place to like address that review?
Yeah, we'll be issuing a kind of a response to comments, and we'll address them and we'll post them back to everybody, and we'll send an email out probably to everybody saying it's done. That should be done shortly. But yeah, anyone can reach out to me and use the resources on our website. And if they're not sufficient, then reach out further to me would be fine.
Cool, great, thank you. I also wanted to share that in the Ventura River watershed, we're working on a climate resilience plan where we're identifying vulnerabilities along the watershed and then forming adaptation plans to that. And we're just starting to form adaptation strategies for some of the hazards that we've identified. And I think like referencing this document would be really interesting. So I would greatly look forward to touching base regarding that. Maybe we can add this monitoring into our adaptation strategies for sea level rise and coastal erosion. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of the project, but it's called the Watershed Climate Resilience Project.
Only that it was happening. Otherwise I don't have any details about it. Yeah, I am informed that it's happening.
Yeah, no problem. We can touch base about it. I did want to ask a little bit more about your engagement with tribes and if you are engaging with federally and non-federally recognized tribes, and even if you're engaging with community members, what does that look like?
Well, that's a work in progress, actually.
Okay.
And we're doing it all. So as you know, in our region, primarily talking now about the Shumash, there's one federally recognized band, the San Ynez Band. There are 14, a minimum of 14 Shumash bands. Two others have applied for but not been granted federal designation. But we've tried to identify the landscape of the governance within the Shumash Nation. And we've been talking to the same principals you've been talking with, Teresa Romero, I'd say Violet Sage Walker, given the extension of the MPA. So yes, we are trying to be broad-based in that and trying to be, I think, sensitive and acknowledging that the Shumash Nation is not one thing, but it's many things, and trying to understand that in a way we can engage people respectfully.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. We are going to close the meeting soon, and I'd love to touch base after this. So I'd like to thank everyone in person for coming, thank everyone online, and I'll leave the Zoom open for 5 more minutes in case anyone would like to pop in with additional comments. But thank you so much, Mark, and take care.